Glad to have you join us again. If you just joined us, this is Business Breakfast on IBrand Television. Our last conversation segment on the program today. Let's tell you that President Bola Tinubu on Friday last week joined other African leaders to converge on Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, for the first ever Saudi African summit with the view of boosting political and investment ties with us, while also addressing regional security threats. The three-day summit, which ended on Sunday, the 12th of November, saw Saudi Arabia and leaders from more than 50 countries gathered in Saudi Arabia to further develop relations and cooperation between the KSA, that's the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and countries in Africa, promoting strategic partnership. The summit also saw the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and African leaders sign deals worth some 500 million euros, whilst demonstrating KSA's commitment to Africa and expanding them to broader horizon and establishing a fruitful partnership across various political, economic and developmental domains. Leaders who attended the summit included the President of Nigeria, Kenya, Zambia, Djibouti and Mauritania, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia and Niger, and the Foreign Minister of Egypt were also in attendance. Joining me now live virtually from the United Kingdom as we deliberate more on this is the Global Financial and Investment Advisor, Benga Ogunriola. Good morning, sir. It's a pleasure having you join me on the program.
Good morning. It's nice to be here again today.
All right, let's get talking now. Why is Africa becoming important in world politics? This is not the first time we are seeing an economic summit dedicated to Africa. We've seen the US African Summit, we've seen the France African Summit, we've seen the Belt and Road Initiative by China to bring Africa and China together, and also a fresh up from the ease of a successful G20 summit. India is also working towards an African side to hold the mega India-African summit expected to be in Ethiopia capital, that's Addis Ababa, in December this year. The big question now is, why is Africa now the beautiful bride for developed economies?
Aftermath of the Russian-Ukraine war, yes. A lot of countries took position either in support or against of the war, and because of the political relevance of Russia in the world economy generally, and also in the polity of the world, we saw more like an alignment between the Western world and probably the other developing worlds that are at the same time matching up with them. So we see different blocks like China, Russia, and some other countries, more or less like
right, thank you so much for that insight. Now, another big question on the lips of many concerned Africans and Nigerians in particular is this question now. And I want to get your thoughts on this. What do you have to say about past summit that has led to economic ties with superpowers, world powers like you have said, such as China, France, the US? How has this really impacted the continent? And do you see the bilateral relations exploiting the African state at the behest of exploring its untapped economic potential? What's your thoughts on this?
So the African countries need to actually set their house in order. As much as we have these super blocks coming to invest or showing interest in investing in Africa, they would still go to places where they believe their investments will be protected and will yield good dividends. Nobody's going to just come to your country without you putting your house in order. And I think that's what a lot of African countries need to do now. Now that we see that the attention is coming to Africa, we need to put our house in order, put structures in place, put a lot of infrastructures, or at least reasonable working environments, reasonable investing environments, such that when this investment comes, we'll be able to make the best use of it. And at the same time, we are not playing a second fiddle even to this developing country, because if we don't set our house in order, we'll see that we'll be exploited, and we'll just have our resources being taken, and there's really no value for it. So it's good that we put our house in order, put all the necessary structures in place, necessary documentations in place, so that when these people come, we are aligning and we are negotiating based on equal partnership, not having one part being superior or inferior to the other. So we need to set our house in order to be able to maximize the best of the coming investments in African countries.
All right, great one there. Now, still on the just concluded KSA Africa Summit, as part of the Vision 2030 plan to overhaul its economy, the KSA has pledged to invest about $25 billion in Africa by the end of the decade. How realistic is this investment? That's one. And how far would this go in the development of a third world nation still recognized globally as the continent of poverty, hopelessness, high rate of youth unemployment, and the worst state of underdevelopment?
Well, it's a good omen that we are seeing that countries are interested in putting a lot of investment in Africa. Of course, it's not just Saudi Arabia, like you said in your introduction. I mean, we've seen the G20, we've seen China, we've seen Russia, we've seen other blocs also trying to cut Africa. 25 billion is not so significant when you look at it in terms of what it can do for the whole African continent. But it's still something that will go a long way. And I think that African countries too need to be able to identify areas where these investments will also be of great use, so that there will be a due diligence search and a kind of informed investment, such that at the end of the day, it's not just about the foreign countries bringing investment, but investments that are able to change the lifestyle and the lot, of the African people, such that those investments will have great impacts, on the living condition and living standard and development generally of African people and of the African continent itself.
All right, let's come home now. President Tinubu at the summit said Nigeria, and also you also buttressed the fact also where the richest man in Africa and also the president and group chief executive officer of Dangote Group said that Nigeria has some of the world's highest return on investment. First, I'm going to ask you this. Some people are saying it's a laughable statement because the country is still struggling with FX issues. There are closures of business who are still struggling to stay afloat due to the current administration economic reforms, and also the exit of multinationals from the countries amidst government economic reforms stifling the growth of the operating environment and the well-being of the citizens. What is your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so Nigeria is going through a very difficult period currently. Now, what we are seeing happening in Nigeria is not strange, especially for those that have seen the handwriting on the wall, because over the years we have not managed our economy and resources properly, and we are beginning to see the effects of those things now. But I believe that going forward, we'll begin to see some certain level of stability and also some progress in the policy, as long as the leadership currently are focused and they are ready to do that. Because it's one thing for you to have everything set up for you to be able to make progress. It's another thing for the leadership, to take ownership of these things and begin to ensure that things are well placed. Because if the leadership is not forthcoming, then we're not going to see any changes. It's just going to continue like this. So, like I said, we are entering a phase in our economic development whereby we might see some turnaround. For example, over the years we've relied so much on importation of fuel, and I believe that that's going to change now. That would help to shore up the foreign exchange for the country. Now, is the government really thinking about this, and are they planning ahead that when what areas, what resources would they put those largest that will be coming from saving of forex? What areas, what critical areas are they going to put those things into? What areas of the economy are they going to revamp? What areas of the economy are they going to stimulate to ensure more progress? And at the same time, also knowing that some of these things to have time frame, they have a time frame where they would have to do this within their own government and leave, and they must have structures in place and a time frame, a timetable, such that they are able to really do what they need to do. If you look at the economy of the world generally, this year it's improved compared with what we had last year. Many of the countries that had a lot of inflation crisis, you're beginning to see the inflation fall. I remember at the beginning of the year, the United Kingdom, for example, said they were going to have the inflation. By then it was about 10.7%. Now the inflation has fallen to below 5% in the UK. Now these are things that are, that governments and policymakers, set up and they work towards, and it's paid off for them. We must also begin to set up structures. We must begin to set up goals for ourselves. The government needs to set up goals. It's not just enough to say that we want to do this, we want to do that. Set up goals. Let the people know what you have set up, what your targets are, what your goals are, what the objective is, and put figures to those things, and let's see how you work towards them. It's not just to give us lofty promises, but for you to look at things that are achievable and let us know and let us see the progress that you are making towards achieving that. So I believe that if the government is able to do this, we begin to see a lot of with all the foreign direct investments or indirects that are coming into the country currently, and with all the futuristic development that we're expected to see, especially in the area of saving of forex through the fact that we'll not be importing fuel again. By the time all the various refineries that are coming up now begins to come up on stream, I learned that BUA2 is planning to set up its own refinery.
Yes.
There's a refinery in Edo State too that is about coming up on stream. So we have all these refineries that are ready to to start working, and this should be a massive saving for the government. But what would the government do with these savings? How would they stimulate the economy? I think the ball is in their court. They need to be alive to this responsibility.
All right. Thank you so much for that insight. We need to go now, but before we go, you made mention about the UK and then the standard of living in UK and the reduction in inflation rate in the UK. Now, there is this conversation over here in Nigeria that the upsurge of African migrants in the UK as what has plummeted the standard of living in the UK. I'd like to get your reaction about this. You've been in the UK for some time now. What do you have to say concerning this? And there are also indication that some Nigerians who are living in the country on this Japa wave are over there, and they are being stranded, nowhere to live, nowhere to lay their head, and the economic hardship over there is biting them, and very few of them, or if not all of them, are already regretting their moves. What do you have to say concerning all of this?
Well, the economic situation in the UK and most developed world generally actually based on the level of development that they get from other foreigners coming into the countries. Okay. No country on itself is an island, and the fact that a lot of people, professionals, people of all walks of life, have come into those countries, have actually helped to stimulate the growth and development of those countries, no doubt about it, UK inclusive. You discover that most of the population of these countries now, it's not just the locals that are making addition to the development, but you see foreigners, people that have lived in those countries for many years, people that are just coming into the country and adding their own value and their own inputs. No country wants to have any liability. So when you're coming to a particular country, what those countries are looking at is how they can make the best use of your service and of you. And if you are not also looking at what you can do to also get the best out of that country, then at the end of the day, you might not be able to handle things. So I do understand that there are people finding it difficult because of probably the situation they find themselves in the UK. Many of them actually came through the study route, and studying itself in the UK is expensive, and having to cope with studying and also working and raising a family for many is challenging. And because of that, you see a lot of people, not all people, you see a lot of people actually having to readjust. But I believe that for many of them, after a year or two, they get to be able to stabilize, and they are now able to actually survive and thrive, gradually, and make ends meet, and eventually set up a plan to really integrate themselves into the system and begin to grow even with the system.
All right, we'll leave it at that. I'd like to say a big thank you to you for your time. Global Financial and Investment Advisor Gbenga Ogunriola, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation, joining us live from the United Kingdom. Have yourself a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you for having me.